All right. I believe we are live now. Never done this before, so don't really know what it looks like on my screen, but you know, my daughter is constantly doing these videos, and it's this whole TikTok world type thing. And you know, if she has the courage to be able to put herself out there like that, then I guess maybe it's time for Dad to see see if he can get comfortable doing this type of stuff. Personally, you guys that follow me on social media, I don't put my face out there much, besides some interviews here and there. But wonder if maybe this is a little bit better way to connect with a lot of people who do follow us. So um, I do see here on the side that you got some people joining. Just like in my description there, if as I'm doing this, you guys come up with any questions, any feedback, any something I'm talking about that, excuse me, maybe you don't necessarily understand, doesn't make sense, please feel free to comment and ask a question, and I'll try to get to it. My goal is to do more of these. I'll have to try to find the sweet spot, what is probably the right amount of time. I'm wondering if 30 minutes is enough. Maybe it's not enough, but we'll figure it out. So every time I do these, I'm going to kind of ask for some questions ahead of time. Um, Maybe sometimes I want to just hop on and there's something I want to talk about. But today I got a few questions, so I'm gonna jump right into those. Don't always know who they come from. I see the names, but they aren't necessarily people that I know. But I know the first one came from Brian here in Vancouver. I know his son Noah. He's awesome. Great kid, great family. But Brian asked me to talk about the difference between pain, throwing pain, arm pain, and the difference between pain and soreness. Being a pitcher for as long as I was, I got to do it for 14 years professionally, and obviously a bunch of years before that. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one for the younger players. For instance, I had a kid in kind of right before all this shutdown went down, and he was really sore. He used the term that his arm hurt, and when I hear hurt, that kind of tells me that there's an injury. So it's tough, I think, for some of these kids to understand. Obviously, if they haven't felt it before, what is something that I what is something that I throw through versus what is something that I can keep. I need to shut down. What the difference, it can be kind of unnerving for the kids, and especially parents who don't necessarily understand it too. They hear their kids say their arm is hurt or their arm hurts, and they kind of go into panic mode a little bit too. So let me explain a little bit. Okay, so pain, I'll go with the bad one first. Pain, if a kid is throwing or an athlete's throwing and they feel on a pitch, on a certain pitch, they feel, or a certain throw, they feel something pinch in their arm or anywhere else in their body. If they feel something pinch, kind of, if obviously I'm a pitcher, so if there's like a stabbing pain somewhere, um, if you are going through and something just isn't feeling right, like from a certain pitch, those are more of the ones to be concerned about. Um, and again, there's so much gray area when it comes to what pain and soreness is. It's almost the type of thing where you have to experience it to really be able to start to understand it. Um, as far as soreness goes, after you're done throwing the next day, even if you threw a lot that day, you might start feeling it pretty close to after you're done throwing. Maybe even later on in that evening or later on that day. The common areas for pitchers to get sore are in the back of your shoulder. Okay, so we have our deltoid back there, and we refer to that as, after you throw the ball, there's muscles that need to slow your arm down, right? And that deltoid muscle back there, a couple muscles back there, that's what is used to slow it down. So if you throw an extreme number of pitches, whether you were prepared for it or not, that is a common area to be sore. Back in your scap, along your shoulder blade, along your spine, your scap muscles back there. That's another common area to feel soreness. Up on your lat muscle underneath, that's another common area to feel soreness. And then in your forearm, okay, so on the inside of it, there's muscles that run. If it's underneath, that's where we might be a little bit more concerned. But when we feel stuff on the top, especially kind of where that little bump is inside our elbow, I refer to that as our curveball muscle. If we go out and we spin a bunch of curveballs that day, we may feel extra tightness in that bump of a muscle right there on top of the elbow. And again, those are more of the common area issues, something that we don't necessarily need to be concerned about, and we also don't need to feel that I can't throw with that soreness. To be honest, when we have that sort of soreness, it throwing through it and working through it and helping loosen things up helps us recover quicker. So being understanding that, for instance, this kid I had that came in and talked about how his arm was hurting. It was all normal soreness areas. So he if he would have thrown through it, he would have felt better. And to be honest, after talking with him, I kind of forced him, helped him understand why we want to keep throwing through it, and he felt much better afterwards. Sorry, looks like I'm lagging a little bit. But he ended up feeling better afterwards. So again, for that kid in that moment going into it, he didn't know. He didn't know that what he was feeling was okay. So again, it's one of those things you have to experience it. If you locally, wherever you're at, if you know somebody who is a thrower, or someone who did it for a long time, they're really good people to ask this question to, because again, it's something that you honestly have to experience. Now, if you are feeling pain, the common question is how long to shut it down, how long to not throw for, and depending on the severity of it, if it's bicep tendonitis is a very common one. It's almost like in the front on the top bicep, but your bicep muscle runs up and that tendon runs up and connects in your shoulder. That's a common one, and something we refer to as dead arm. So dead arm, it's almost like in your bicep tricep area, that between your elbow and your shoulder, that part of your arm, we can feel like an achy soreness. It's almost like, to be honest, almost feels like your arm can break at some point. Like it feels like it's deep down in your bone. Again, understanding what it is, we're not concerned about it, but we just have to understand why we're feeling that. And then, to be honest, both those things, when we feel the dead arm in the upper part of the arm and then the bicep tendonitis, those are two common areas where fatigue sets in, and it kind of comes in, and we start feeling those sort of sorenesses and I guess pains, if you refer to it. But again, those type of things, we want to shut it down. If you feel dead arm, if you feel some bicep tendonitis, I would recommend 24, 48 hours, maybe 72, to just help it recover, give it some time, and then from there you should be okay to get back to throwing. Now, if it's a severe case, if we've been throwing through it for a long time, and it is a really painful thing, then maybe we need to really slow down, take a step back, and give it at least a week of no throwing. While you're doing that, you can be doing exercises to help recover. Some of the J-band stuff out there we're going to talk about here in a minute are good things to do. But again, if you're feeling fatigue type soreness, rest is probably the biggest piece. And again, not thinking I'm injured, because I'm not. Right? An injury is something that's torn, something that is severely strained. There's a very big difference, and again, it's experiencing is a big thing. Hang on, I'm reading a couple questions. All right, so let's see, Nick. How you doing, Nick? Nick asked a question here. Why, from a development standpoint, is it important to completely shut your arm down periodically, especially as a youth athlete? All right, let's get to that topic real quick. Okay, someone else asked a question about arm care exercises, things to do during this shutdown when a lot of us aren't with our teams. We have to come up with things to do at home, playing catch with mom or dad, playing catch against a wall, and then how can we do things to take care of our arm while this is happening if we don't have access to things like J bands or other sort of arm care devices, I guess you would say. Uh, first, first, let me get a little bit into what arm care means, because the term arm care is thrown around a lot, and it's become a very popular term. Um, it's it's almost like a fad a little bit. You know, everybody that there's always arm care associated with some sort of team. You know, it's probably something that's mentioned in how they take care of their athletes. Arm care is there's many layers to it besides just doing J bands, just doing arm care exercises. So understanding and developing a good throwing mechanics, not necessarily pitching delivery. I mean, obviously we need that, but just good throwing mechanics in general is a huge thing. And I'm not going to get into what throwing mechanics are. I'm just going to kind of talk about the different parts of arm care. But throwing mechanics has to be the number one thing. If we're not throwing the ball properly, using our body properly, you know, we go out there and play 4, 5, 3 games in a weekend, and we're making so many throws with improper mechanics. We're putting extra stress on our arm each time. Each time, you can almost think of it as one throw with proper mechanics, with bad mechanics. You're looking at, you know, that might equal to 5 or 10 throws. You know, with just the amount of stress that it puts in the arm. So proper mechanics is has got to be at the top of that list. Um, Total body strength. So if again, a lot of young kids, they're just not fully mature yet to have that total body strength. But as kids start getting older, for me, it's one reason why I love multiple sports. You know, when kids are playing different sports or using different parts of their body, different muscles, ankles and hips and core, it's used differently. So when we're strong from head to toe, you know, it makes it a lot easier to control our body for those throwing mechanics. So again, so total body strength is important when our kids become teenagers, when they hit puberty, when maturity sets in. I would really recommend something that we didn't do in my generation, but I would really recommend finding a strength coach, finding a strength program that you trust, getting in there and developing full body strength. Wish that would have been around 20, 30 years ago. Um, Preseason throwing. If your season, I'll talk about high school real quick. If your season around here, high school season starts March 1st-ish. Yeah, March 1st-ish. Every year it's around that date. So there should be at least 8 to 10 weeks of throwing that happens before that, right? So we need to ramp our arm up. We need to follow some sort of progressive throwing program that makes sure that when our season does start, that when that first game comes, that we are in a healthy manner ready to throw, you know, whatever it is, 30, 40 pitches in the game. If I'm a starting pitcher, if I know somebody, if I know that for sure I'm going to be a starting pitcher, I want to do things to make sure that I'm ready to throw, you know, 50, 60, 70, whatever, however many my coach wants me to be ready to throw that first game. I want to have built up to that number, okay? And finding some sort of progressive throwing program. We have one on our website, but there are a ton out there. You just have to find what works for you. The worst thing that we can do as throwers, as athletes, is going to, whether it's tryouts or going to that first game of the season, the first practice, completely cold, not having have done anything to prepare, right? So building up arm strength, arm stamina, whatever you want to call it, preseason leading up to that first one is another huge thing, something that doesn't happen often. often enough. It's happening more, but just not often enough. Understanding pitch counts. Okay, and I know pitch counts is there's two sides of it. You hear the side that if we're it shouldn't matter. It's sort of like a tough type thing. My kid, we should be able to throw this much. If kids aren't throwing this much, then there's something wrong with them. They're weak. We got to understand that not all kids are ready to go out there and throw 80 pitches in that game, right? If that player hasn't built up to that number, then they're not ready for that number. Period. Right? It's if they're ready to throw 20 pitches, they're ready to throw 20. You might be able to push them 25, maybe 30, but if we start expanding further past that, that's where we're running into chance of injury. It might not happen that day, but as that kid goes on, whether it's his next time out there pitching, right, and there's severe fatigue that has set in from that time before where he threw more than what he was ready for, that's where issues can come in. If we're on a roller coaster type pattern where I'm throwing an extreme number of pitches and then dropping way down and not throwing much for a few weeks, and then another extreme number of pitches and then dropping down again, it's going to catch up with these athletes, and we see it, and it may not be till high school, it may not be till college, and if they're fortunate enough to go beyond that, it may not happen till then, right? But I think it's really important that we, especially as parents, understand the arm a little bit better and understand that if we're putting the arm on a roller coaster ride, yo-yo type, demand of it, it's not good. It's not good, and we're setting our athletes or our kids' arms up for injury later on down the road. So again, we just have to educate ourselves. This information is out there. There's people talking about it. I think that as parents, if we're not listening to it, that's our fault. That's our fault. There's plenty of information out there. Between game throwing. Okay, I got a whole list here of stuff, so that's what I'm reading off of. Between game throwing. So tournament baseball is a huge thing these days. It's as you all know, it's kind of taken over our youth baseball community. Now with tournament baseball comes an extreme amount of throwing over a weekend, and then usually no games during the week, and then another extreme amount of games and throwing the next weekend, and then that pattern keeps going. And then it seems like most programs have a period where they will have a rest weekend during the month, or maybe they're a program that goes excuse me, maybe they're a program that goes tournament weekend off, so they have this almost 2-week break between their games. The issue with a lot of stuff is that during that week off or during those 2 weeks off, not enough throwing happens to keep the stamina up. Not enough, and we call it conditioning the arm. Not enough is happening to keep the arm prepared and to keep that stamina up for the next time out there. And again, we got to understand that when our kids are going into playing these tournaments, whether it's a 2 or 3 day tournament and they're playing 3 to 5 games, the amount of throws they're making, they're warming up 3 to 5 times. The amount of throws that happen in games, the amount of throws that happen for catchers, the amount of throws that happen for pitchers that are throwing in multiple games, it is, excuse me, it's something that my generation, I'm 42, something that we never experienced. So again, we look at a lot of the injuries that are happening out there these days to kids that it shouldn't be happening to at the age, and there's a lot of this type of stuff that we're talking about, this arm care topic, that you can relate to those injuries that are happening. Another thing that you can relate to is that especially with our professional athletes and our college ones, is that some of these bodies are so strong and they're throwing so dang hard that the body just wasn't meant to handle it. So, it's important to also mention that there may be pitchers who have perfect mechanics, and visually from the outside, it doesn't look like they should ever get hurt. But one, they're throwing extremely hard, and two, a lot of these athletes were really good when they were younger, And we all know what happens to really good athletes when they're younger. They're the ones that get used the most. So there's definitely a correlation there. Now again, every story is a little bit different. We can't pinpoint it and blame it on one certain thing, but there's a lot of these things that we're finding do lead to these issues. Last thing I'm going to say on this. So I know Alan. I like Alan. He's a great guy. We've had a lot of great conversations, a lot of great talks about long toss. Talk about J bands. So J bands have become a very popular thing, right? It's a lot of teams, a lot of parents go online and buy them. A lot of teams go on and buy them for all their kids, um, because that's what we're supposed to do. Because that's how we take care of the arms. And then we find, and I know we see it in our facility, because we give them to our athletes too. And even though we're on the kids and we talk to them about form and how to use the bands properly, the kids go over there and they do the bands, and to be honest, it's a hot mess, right? It's the form is horrible. They go over there and they're just kind of going through the motions. To be honest, I didn't really understand the importance of taking care of my arm until I was in my 20s and I actually got hurt for the first time. I didn't really understand the importance of taking care of my arm. So a lot of these kids' mindsets are, to be honest, in the same way. They're just doing this because coach told them to, right? It's in their bag because coach said, "Here, this is what you're supposed to do before practice." Um, it's become almost like a popularity contest. Who has bands, who doesn't? All I'm going to say on that is that if you're gonna go out of your way to spend money on them, learn how to use them and use them properly, and hold your players accountable, hold yourself accountable to make sure that we're doing it right. Okay, if you're not going to use it, okay, then don't get it. It's we got to be better with those, and it's frustrating for me, and knowing kids, we were all like that too as adults when we were that age. We just, our attention to detail is very poor. So if we have a team, if we're a coach on a team and we're running our kids through J bands, we need to be there with it, do it as a team every single time, okay? Because their form is not where it needs to be, and we need to be there to make sure that we're holding them accountable to paying attention to what they're doing. Don't just buy them for your kids, your players or your kids, and let them put them in their bag. Okay, stay with them, check on them every once in a while if they're older to make sure they're doing it right. But we got to make sure we're doing them correctly. All right. All right. Let's see. Deanna, any advice for an incoming JUCO player? There's going to be a backlog of players. My son is going to nationally ranked team with a 22nd year players. Should the rip? So locally here, we have a junior college that I am one of the pitching coaches there. Can't be there full time, but when I can, I'm there to help them. So I'm kind of in the middle of a lot of the stuff that's going on. So I actually just talked with our head coach yesterday a little bit about this, and I know that what we're doing at our school, our sophomores that we had this year, our head coach is doing everything he can to find them a spot for next year in a higher program. What we don't want to do, wouldn't be fair to our freshman players, who will be sophomores next year, and I'm not quite sure about how that's going to go down yet. I think they're still making some decisions, but it wouldn't be fair to any of the players to have that many players on a roster, and then to do the red shirt again. It's all it's very interesting, something that the NCAA, none of these programs have ever had to deal with before. So I hope that they'll come down to the best resolution. I'm not quite sure yet what's going to happen with it. I know there's even talks of the MLB draft this year either being postponed, having a limited number of rounds. um, I think a lot of that's shaken out still. I know that was a very similar question to what I'm answering over here too, but I think the best piece of advice I can give in a situation like that is we just have to be prepared the best we can. I mean, it's almost like you're a bench player a little bit. You got to be ready for your name is called, for when your name is called. We can never look at the situation and think, why me? I mean, again, we this Deanna, your son, still has an opportunity to play at the next level. What that's going to look like because of all this, that's kind of yet to be seen still. I would really hope there wouldn't be um, that many second year players. But again, we're all we're all in a place of uncertainty right now because of it. So do me a favor, Deanna, and send me a message on that question in a month or two, and I can hopefully be able to answer your question a little bit better. Another question I had on this topic also was advice for high school athletes that were seniors this year going into college next year. Probably similar to that question that was just asked. Um, these players are going to be going into a situation that was very different 2 weeks ago. So that situation going into it now, it's very uncertain about what it's actually going to look like. Um, Again, not a lot of answers about what for sure it's going to look like, but again, just like a lot of stuff we talk about, all we can really do as people and as athletes is make sure that we're prepared ourselves. We need to go into that situation, you know, working the same, having the same mindset. Don't go into this situation thinking like, "Why me? I'm getting screwed." All those sort of negative mindsets put us in a bad place for when we are working or anytime a decision is made and it's not in my favor. Um, my attitude can start swirling in the wrong direction. And again, for me as an athlete, when I played, I got released 2 different times, and it's kind of how you respond to it. This is definitely going to be some adversity for these players, how they handle it, and I think it's important for that us as parents, that we are encouraging to them, and instead of pointing out how bad things are going to be or how bad things might be, we got to make sure that we keep their head and their attitude in a place where they're going into it with their head high and excited for the opportunity. That's the best piece of advice I can give you right now. But again, I mean, to be honest, what I just said, that should be a constant sort of mindset or attitude. Um, let's see here. Pitching and catching within the same game or on the same day. I'm not sure who asked this question. I just wrote it down. This kind of goes back to kind of bouncing back and forth here. This goes back to kind of an arm care topic, to the arm care topic. First of all, I mentioned earlier with this tournament baseball, this is happening. It's happening every single weekend, and on most teams, it's happening. Usually, the catchers on a team, they're usually one of the better athletes, to be honest, and they're usually back there. They usually have a better arm, right? And those better arms, when we're younger, usually make really good pitchers. So I think it's important to understand that as a catcher, how many squats these kids do, how many throws back to the pitcher they make. If a kid is catching, if he catches 200 pitches, be it in one game or 2 games back to back, their legs are pretty shot. Remember, these aren't grown men. They don't have the strength of grown men. You look at big league catchers; these guys catch day after day after day after day. They're grown men. They're not kids. Whose bodies are still maturing. I think it's important to remember that as a thrower, as a pitcher, my legs are so important to me. My legs, how I drive down the mound, the stability that I get out of my legs, the bounce that I get. If I'm pitching with fatigued legs and I'm not able to get the full amount of strength and power out of my legs, that I'm going to start asking my arm for more energy, for more effort, when the whole point of a throwing delivery is to take pressure off of their arm. Okay, if I'm using my body right, my legs are working right, the turning part of my delivery is moving properly. It's supposed to take stress off of my arm, right? And that's why you see some excuse me, some pitchers and throwers who can throw and never be sore. Okay, they do a really good job of staying healthy. They're never really sore. You look at these pitchers, and these are usually they usually have good mechanics, right? The movements, the strength in their body is usually pretty solid, right? And then you look at the kids who are always sore. You look, and if we were to break down their delivery, you're usually going to see that their lower half probably isn't working efficiently. They're probably opening up too soon with their upper half. So you're going to see these issues within their delivery, and that's leading to arm weakness and arm soreness. So to get back to that, if I get a kid who's catching and he's catching a ridiculous amount of pitches, I'm not talking innings. Stop counting innings. Okay, we got to look at how many pitches these kids are catching. Each one of those is a squat. Each one of them is a throwback, even though it's at a lower effort. Okay, my main focus is on what it's doing to their legs. You send that kid out to pitch, and he's not able to get down that mound properly. He's putting extra stress on his arm. Period. Okay, it's if we're not as coaches, if we're not developing more kids to pitch to where that kid who is catching can just focus on catching, then we're not doing our job, and vice versa. If we don't have enough kids that can catch, we need to develop more kids to catch. Okay, I as a coach or as a parent, I highly recommend not letting your kid catch and pitch in the same day, or in the same game. Um, Now, what if that kid caught the day before and the coach, or we want him to pitch the next day? Again, I think we need to be cautious and conscious of what the demand put on that body was the day before. And then again, there's other factors. What are his throwing mechanics like? What is his history like? Um, it's we got to get to a point where we stop pitching and catching, right? And again, we're learning about all these things, and when we're so wind driven at these younger ages, a lot of these mistakes are made. And again, it shouldn't be happening, but it is happening. Now, in the history of the game, did kids catch and pitch in the same games? Yeah, they did. Of course, they did. But again, look at how the landscape has changed now compared to what it was like my generation, when all we did was play Little League. We played 20, maybe 30 games a year, and then we wanted to play other sports, right? It's very different, okay? And I think it's important that we are paying attention to that, and that we are thinking forward always. Where if my kid has a lot of aspirations to play this game for a long time, am I doing things to help him get to reach that goal, right? And again, don't take the athlete out of the player, but we have to be smart about how we're handling that stuff. All right, last thing I'm gonna say before I go. It looks like this has already been over a half hour. Last thing, hang on, let me see if there's any more questions. During this shutdown that all of us are in, where we're asked to stay home, not to go out much. Our kids players, their teams aren't practicing. There's no sports happening. What are some ideas that the kids can do to stay active, to not lose the momentum that they had going beforehand? It is going to be tough. There has to be some parent involvement. Going out there, playing some catch, going out and playing some pepper with each other. For those who don't know what pepper is, one person has a bat, the other one's throwing them a pitch. They're hitting a short ground ball back to them, and we're just doing that back and forth. I know that when I was growing up, my father and I played that endlessly. It's great for, if they're the hitter, it's great for kind of barrel control, and if you're the one fielding, especially when we're close to each other. It's a great way to work on having to be on your toes and quick reactions. Tee work. Most kids, not all, most should have a tee set up, whether it's in the garage or the backyard. Go out there and hit off the tee every single day. Have a plan, have a routine for what you're doing. Um, go out to the park, go somewhere where we can stretch it out. Make sure we keep that arm stamina by playing some long toss. And if you have access to a pitching mound somewhere, get on the mound. I would really recommend pitchers that we're still getting off the mound twice a week, right? And you might be throwing into a fence. Maybe you have a parent that is going to catch you. If you have one of these cool 9-hole pocket nets that you can set that up back there, even better. But don't stop throwing, right? The worst thing that we can do is as athletes look at this as it's a vacation or a break. We definitely don't want that. So, but again, I know that some are treating it that way. So do your best to keep throwing. Don't stop. And then as far as strength and conditioning goes, do some body weight exercises. Look over YouTube; they're everywhere. Try to for those of you that were active with a strength coach somewhere. Think about some of the stuff that you did with them when you guys were doing strength training, body weight type exercises, and work through that stuff daily. I would really recommend doing something daily as an athlete to make sure that you are keeping the motivation and momentum going. And then as far as cardio, you got streets everywhere. Go out and run some sprints. If you have a hill close to you, do some hills. Hills are great, especially for pitchers. But just stay active. You know, we're all in the same boat. It's very unfortunate, but please, as an athlete, don't look at this as a break. Don't get caught up staring at video games or the TV all day. Go out there and stay active. Let's see. Any more questions? That's it for now. Hang on. I've got a glove that needs to be added. Oh, Jeff, go ahead and send it. I think that's one of my gloves, if I'm remembering right. All right, so that's it. Thank you guys all for listening. Looks like, again, first time doing this. Maybe if things line up, I can do this once a week or something. But if you have any questions that I didn't get to, if you want to send it in a private message afterwards, please feel free. But stay healthy out there. Please observe what our leaders are asking. I know that for me, I've had people reach out and ask if we can meet up at a park or something. You know, I have my parents, you know, very fortunate. My parents live right next door. They're both in their mid-60s, and for me, they're everything. And if I were to go out there and even though the chances are slim, you know, if something were to be passed on to me and then I pass it on to them, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. It would be an extremely tough thing to live with. So please observe it, take it serious, and let's all get past this and hopefully we all as people and as a nation learn something from all this. But that's it. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and thanks for joining.